Hello, sinners.
Welcome back.
We just ended the school year and we are trying to get ahead of next year's episodes to set you up for success for your classroom and your school districts. So we're going to start off by talking about routines and setting students up for success.
I love it. Predictability going all the way. And so when we think about routines, we want to think about showing students, teaching students what they need to know, right? When we have predictable routines, it creates safety for staff and students. It helps reduce everyone's anxiety because everybody knows what's expected. And really when students learn routines and they can do them independently, that increases their overall independence and allows them to navigate different things because that routine is down, it's set, right? I can access other things because I know I can handle this.
So we think about this for particular categories of students, right? So like students with autism or students in more intensive settings, students with cognitive disabilities, but this is good for all students. It's good for adults. It's good for everyone without disabilities. And if you are a teacher and if you remember going through your pre-service courses, if you remember the Harry Wong First 100 Days of School,
yes, yeah.
Like that book is all about routines. And that's what we're talking about. Like it looks a little bit different or more intensive, more specific, more leaning into executive functioning support and more practice, more repetition for students with more intensive needs, but it is all the same concept. It all comes from the same research and the same skill and practice.
Yeah.
Right? So like, I don't want you to think about it in a completely different vernacular than what that looks like for all students, because all students benefit from that. And all students benefit from the teaching of it, but students with more specific needs or more intensive needs need you to be more explicit with the instruction of it, more explicit with the reinforcement of the routine as the work. And so that's what we're going to talk about.
100%.
All right. So where do you want to start, Megan?
I think it's important to think about before your students arrive, what are those natural routines or what are those things that you want your students to do? How do you want them to enter the room? When they're in the room, what do you want them to do? I often think about like the hidden curriculum, right? Mm-hmm. When we think about those things that aren't explicitly taught in such as our inclusive settings, like in middle school or high school in math or reading, language arts. What does that practice look like? So is the environment physically arranged so students can enter, they know where to sit, they know where to access information, thinking about our visuals and our schedules. Where are they? What do they look like? So when students arrive, do they know what's expected? Do they know what the schedule of the day is? Do they know what's going to happen next or where to turn in their materials? So thinking about all those different transitions within your classroom and what are the routines around them?
When I think about this one, I think about the things that can so easily set a student up to be successful to then access the learning of the day. Mm-hmm. So what you teach all students on the very first day needs to be taught for a longer period of time for students with special needs. So lining up procedures, bathroom procedures, turning in assignment procedures, whether it's electronic or physical or a combination of both, those need to be specifically and explicitly taught and reinforced in your classroom, including workflow and people flow. Like if you've been a teacher for more than 1 year, you normally will have those things that continuously were a problem that you're like, oh, they never were successful as a group, or as like this particular student really, really struggled to line up effectively. Maybe they weren't keeping their hands to themselves. You know what I mean? Like you have those things. So think about that and think about strategies to lining up, right? Like you do that 1,200 times a week. Like that's a really important routine to set up successfully at the beginning of a year. I have one teacher in mind at one of our Fed 4 sites that color codes visuals for the year. And all of them have like the same color for all of their visual supports. And then throughout the year, they start pulling that back And then by the end of the year, all of them are using a single color as opposed to each having an individualized color. Like, it's an intentional shaping so that they no longer need an individual color where every student is red or yellow or blue. Like, then they're all on a single color and they can all cue to black visuals or something, you know, like, because then it's cued to a system of supports rather than a unique or individualized support.
Yeah, and that makes me even think about when you're having students engaging in that inclusive setting. So I worked with a student and her color was purple. And when she went into the inclusive setting, she had that purple chair or that purple visual on where to sit. She had a purple carpet square. She had a purple folder. So it's a nice way also when you're thinking about generalizing skills, including students in the inclusive setting as a way to support them very naturally. So your tools, your resources, your routines, and your structure can generalize. One thing that I used to do when I was working in junior high is I would go in and talk to the inclusive setting teachers, and I would say, you know, how do you have students turn in their work? What is your routine and, you know, when they enter the classroom look like? Do they get right to work? Are they supposed to start in an activity? Where do they access the information? Is it on the board? Are they keeping it on their webpage? You know, some of those key questions, and then using that information to build my routines within my space, because those are things that I can practice. We can help generalize, and we're teaming, right? We're not learning different systems, routines. We're really collaboratively approaching that target.
I mean, it's a significant challenge being in special ed in middle school and high school settings because every teacher has a different system. As much as we try and streamline them, students have unique needs, and we will write an IEP that meets the needs of that student. And I remember working with all of my students with medical and physical needs, and I needed to design a system that met their unique needs, and that did not align with each teacher's system. And so that was incredibly frustrating for my students and for the teachers that they were working with, especially in secondary, because they had a different teacher every single hour. But that is the work that we are here to do, right? So me teaching the student how to advocate for themselves, me working with them to make sure that their system worked effectively for them to do it and to consistently turn in the work, right? Fine. The teacher's got to get there, right? So like,
I get it.
Cognitive flexibility is important.
Yep.
You can do hard things.
Yep.
And building in a system for yourself as a teacher to be like, okay, my system for most students is going to be this. What does it look like when it has to look a little bit different for the students who can't physically turn in a paper or who can't do this other thing because they're still doing the work, right? And it needs to flex a little bit, but you also have to teach the system for your room, right? So like, you've got to have some cognitive flexibility in that as a teacher. And when you teach students that system, how are you going to flex for those students with a little bit of a different need and not make them feel bad about it? Because that continuously happens with my students with a physical or medical need in particular. And then it gets put on them to have them fix it. And I was like, no, it's your job. It's your job as the teacher. It's legally required that you do this thing. So it's very, very challenging as a teacher. I 100% get that. And that's our job.
100%. I think also bringing the student into the conversation is what works for you in those environments, what's working here and not working here. When you were talking about the 120 different routines or things that we have to be thinking about as an educator, one thing that I was always referring to when I taught is, what are the verbal prompts that I'm giving over and over and over again, right? That often come during challenging times where there isn't a routine in place, such as coming in the classroom, leaving the classroom, coming back from lunch, going out to recess,
grabbing their materials for class. Do they have the right books?
Coming into my room because they need to take a break, and maybe I'm teaching a lesson and these students have to come in during that activity, right? And so thinking about what are those verbal prompts that I'm giving repeatedly, and that's a great place to start when you're thinking about routines and where you want to target your energy initially.
I would say making sure you're talking to your staff about it too. Like
Yeah.
if they are being made crazy by themselves having to cue to the same thing all the time, you will likely have heard about it as the teacher or the staff. But it would be awesome to collect that data somehow and use it to inform your routines moving forward.
Yeah, one thing you could do, and I think we talk about this during structured teaching training, part of our proactive measure series, is we have something where it's just a visual that you put on the wall. And if teachers, staff, that's an idea, put it up on the wall, because we're so busy and we often forget to go back and touch base, or even we often don't have time to connect at the end of the day. And then those thoughts are often lost. So have a place where your staff members can jot something down. Hey, the routine from lunch to recess is really difficult. I need some strategies or tools to help me, right? So think about how are you soliciting communication from your stakeholders, whether it be students, staff, parents. When I think about routines, even my own routine coming back from summer vacation, maybe helping the family connecting. Would there be a schedule that would be helpful for your student? A routine that I can create to get them out the door in the morning, to get them back into that learning zone or that ready to learn zone for coming back into school, right? So thinking about stakeholders being staff, students, and families.
I'm thinking, I've never been prepared enough to do this, but I'm thinking about those back to school nights that families come to. Like if you have a routine that you have kind of organized ahead of time, gaining family and potentially student input at that point in time, and say like, what do you think about this? Do you have any thoughts? Would this be a good thing to practice at home? Are there portions of that might work? Like, I think that would be a kind of an interesting access point for student and family voice.
I love it, right?
Yeah.
Because we know that when we have a routine, it increases our own or decreases our stress level. And then we're able to access our environment so much easier, whether that be learning at school or at home, or in the community. So it's really important to be thinking about that. I did not want to miss, so we talked about kind of setting up. One thing that I often see kind of drift coming from is revisiting routines throughout the school year, right?
When those breaks happen, or long
weekends, breaks, or when you're like, hey, I'm giving those verbal reminders 20 times. I need to go back and work on that routine, right? So what is your own self-check and reflection look like?
I think people very appropriately get stuck on the new targets that are coming up rather than taking a beat and feeling like it's worth the effort at that moment in time to pause and reteach or teach a little bit differently, because students gain skills, right? So what is it that's not quite working? Maybe change the vocabulary a little bit, maybe update the visuals, maybe just reteach, right? Maybe the staff is prompting a little bit differently, or their wait time has changed, or any number of factors, but spending 2 days reteaching would probably save a lot of frustration on everyone's point, but also then save the relationship too between that student and staff if that was challenging.
Yeah. So schedule it, right? We all get busy. We have 100 things to do. Put it on your calendar. I'm going to, reteach, or we're going to do a video model or a role play on entering the classroom in the morning and putting away your materials. So just don't forget about the drift, because it happens to everybody. And it will be your culture. If routines are, we're all engaging them, it just becomes part of that classroom culture.
All right. What else you got, Meg?
Something that I was thinking about are preparing for changes, right? We have a routine, it's going to need to change. How are you prepping your students for that, and what does it look like? So for example, we are going to, instead of going outside, the routine has changed and we're going to have indoor recess, right? So some students could handle that change or that transition really easily. Some may need additional structure and support. It's going to be important to be prepared when you know what some of those routines are going to be. So when those changes do happen, you can utilize those resources. Another thing I think about with flexibility is when new students come into your classroom, whether it be a new student to the district or a new student to just your room. What does that look like? Are we going back and reteaching the routine? Do we have visuals that we're using? Is there a routine or a book of social stories that teach the routine that I can give to the student? And what does that look like? So really thinking about preparing students and having those supports pre-made or created so you can give a copy visually, but also thinking about, are there students within your classroom that rock certain routines, whether it be like, hey, I have my end of the day routine where I'm putting away my materials, I'm doing my classroom job, I'm packing away my stuff for the end of the day, and then I'm checking out. Maybe I have a student that rocks that portion, and maybe that's going to be my student leader. So if I do have students come in, or if I do have a change, that I could have that student model and kind of be responsible. It also is that leadership position of students. So find those students that excel in certain routines and ask them, connect with them to see if they could be a leader in that work, whether it be helping create materials, helping be a role model, whatever that may look like.
I would say some of our settings with a lot of high frequency ins and outs for student changes, on and off our caseloads, in and out of our buildings due to any number of changes, whether it's high mobility for families or high intensity needs means the student is changing programming. I think some of those programs and teachers have gotten incredibly skilled at setting up a routine that includes the whole classroom to review common classroom practices as a part of onboarding a new student into that system. It also serves the purpose of what we're talking about, to do that review and to set up student leaders to show what they know, right? So it's kind of doing all of those things at the same time, and it's doing that quick review for staff, like, this is what we do. Remember, like, this is how we operate, right? So kind of how you onboard a new student into the space. Yes, they will likely need more than what you are doing as the quick review. They'll do some kind of alongside and maybe in a little bit more intensive way. But you can also send that home to a family. Like, if you create a system as a teacher, knowing that you tend to have more new students in and out in either a Fed 2, a Fed 3, a Fed 4, like, what does that look like? How can I make this, number one, better for everyone, knowing that it's more likely to occur in your setting, and have a plan for it before the year even starts, right? And number two, like, more smooth for everyone when you make a system and say, hey, if we have new people start, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
So that itself becomes a routine.
Yes.
It's way easier. And then when you have staff absent, you have a routine for that. When you have more than one staff absent, you have a routine for that,
100%
right? Scheduling changes is one of the highest stressors, both for staff and for students. And when our staff are stressed, our students are stressed.
Right.
So having plans for how that works and then it's not just verbal. You're not just taking the kids along for the ride.
Right.
No matter how skilled they are, it is a very stressful scenario to have that just keep changing all day long. So I think the more you can make a plan for what that looks like and indicate it with something on their schedule, like, I know kind of the original was like a star. There's something special happening today.
Right, yeah.
And then it's
a
not,
change.
right, like, it's not just like a special event. It's like, ooh, this means there's something different today.
Right.
Okay, something different. Different.
Yeah.
Like, different isn't positive, negative, it's neutral. It's
Right.
just different than what
It's
our
just a
normal
change.
Monday schedule looks like, right? Like,
right.
the music teacher's out today. Okay, instead we're going to do X,
Yep.
right? And I think that can go for any number of things if you practice it.
100%.
So
one thing I wanted to capture before we end this segment or this episode is just thinking about, you brought up paraprofessionals or the support staff educators that are working with our students. And many of them have to take, a sick leave or have something going on or an appointment where they won't be at school, right? And so we do have a lot of subs coming into the programs, into our programs. And so thinking about having your staff identify what are the routines within each time frame, within a language arts class, within a science course, within social skills. And then how are you prompting within those routines, right? And so is the routine something that, so when I come into the classroom, I can sit down and say, okay, students are supposed to read for 5 minutes quietly for the first 5 minutes. If the student is off task, I can walk by and just tap on the book as a reminder. That's how I'm going to prompt the student, right? So I think that not only supports substitutes coming in, it could help support the student because we're being really routine within our own practice and predictable, but it also is helping those staff be mindful of what their role is and what that level of prompting looks like and how we as educators really should be supporting with honoring the student's independence as much as possible.
I think with any support staff, giving them the permission to allow students to be independent, like the data shows that they need to be doing this with increased independence. That does not mean you are not doing your job. That means you're doing your job amazingly well.
Yeah.
Right? If they need a prompt, it can look like this. If they need cueing, please wait first. Yeah. Right? Like those types of permissions explicitly given is a really important thing. It doesn't mean that you're not doing your job.
Right.
And I think the more we can say those things, the better our students will gain the skills they need. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that they are not doing an excellent job.
Right.
So, and it doesn't mean we don't need them. We do need them.
Right.
We need them to monitor. We need them to do the work so that they can quick pop in and do the thing and then pop back out. Right? Like, it doesn't mean that they're not doing their job if the student is listed as gaining that thing independently.
100%.
So it's a tough thing to articulate if you don't have a system with the data, but it doesn't mean that you don't need them, which can feel like that's what you're saying sometimes, but that's not what we are saying.
Right.
We know how valuable these support staff are, especially when you need a sub too.
100%.
So, yep. All right.
So we really know that for a routine to be successful, we have to intentionally teach it. Mm-hmm. We need to show students what's expected. We need to continually practice, right? So scheduling those on our calendar, those monthly check-ins, thinking about, our own reflective practices of where am I giving all those verbal prompts, and then relooking at our routine and seeing how I can support students' independence there. But we also want them to be flexible to support our neurodiverse students and get their voice, right? Get that family voice, get that inclusive setting or that student voice, and think about how can their voice help shape what that routine looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think if you've gained your staff voice who lives and breathes the systems that you're implementing, to make sure that you have systems for the pieces in place that maybe were a challenge the year before for the students that you had, that's super valuable. Otherwise, my reflection point for you all here is use the data that you have and do your best to set up systems and routines for the next school year.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. See you later, sinners.